Here's Parks Associates' SmartTechCheck podcast with Mark Vina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Vina, leader of Parks Associates Smart Home Research Practice, and welcome to the SmartTechCheck podcast, where we cover all consumer tech topics that are smart home, home automation, security, console gaming, and much, much more. Today is Wednesday, September 8th, 2021. Another interesting and big week in tech, so we've got lots to chat about today. On the roster for today's podcast are my usual partners in crime, John Quain, our resident journalist who writes for the New York Times and Tom's Guide, Stuart Walpin, who writes for Twice and Techlicious, and Rob Pecoraro, who writes for USA Today and Fast Company, and Wirecutter is out on another assignment. Again, I'm always shocked when one of these esteemed journalists, actually want to make a living and don't want to get on my podcast, but I can tolerate them. So anyway, gentlemen, good afternoon from San Jose, California. How are you?
Good afternoon.
The Mets are in third place, so I'm only so.
Well, I was actually in New York over the weekend helping my mom. She's in the process of moving down to South. She sold her home in New Jersey. She's moving down to South Carolina to an assisted living place. And I actually got a chance, because I was in New York for all of like 72 hours, to see a Yankee game in person. It was on Sunday, Stuart, and I almost got pneumonia because it rained on and off. And as I told the buddies that I were with, they were going to play that game if a torrential storm whipped through Yankee Stadium, because it's, the next 3 weeks are going to be pretty big in the American League East. But I still have some hope for the Mets. They could still come back. Stranger things have happened. John, how was your Labor Day weekend? Anything exciting?
Good. No, I was ensconced in the country, so just taking care of chores in the country and cooking and working and doing the usual country living stuff. So I enjoyed it. I mean, Sunday was a little gloomy, but hey, at least it's not a drought.
No, it's not. And Saturday was beautiful.
It was gorgeous.
At least in the Princeton, New Jersey area where my mom is. But anyway, let's get to our factoid of the week from Park Associates. This is really an interesting data point because I presented last week on this data at our Connected Healthcare Summit that we did. And don't know if you had a chance to kind of react to this, but I certainly want to get your reaction to this. It probably won't be surprising, and it's kind of interesting data since Apple is supposedly going to announce new smartwatches next week. But our research indicates that 73% of current caregivers are likely to buy an independent living solution for their loved ones. And among these, what we like to call intenders, that people who haven't bought yet but are planning to buy, 28% are planning to acquire a smartwatch, which is probably not surprising. 25% are looking at PERS solutions as a personal emergency response system product, like a Life Alert type of product. And 25% are even now looking at these professionally installed smart home sensors. And there's all different flavors of them. Those could be sensors that make you look, will notify you if there's a fire or there's a CO2 problem in your house, or some of the more advanced ones now have fall down detection if you put these sensors in your home. And even 22% of these folks are looking at smart display solutions. And those are, Amazon, not Echo, but the devices that Amazon has with the built-in display. Facebook has the Portal solution. So pretty strong numbers, frankly, from what we like to say the smart home play in the connected home space. But Stuart, let me start with you. Any surprises in this data?
No, it's not surprising. It's just a lot of this data sometimes is so general that it's hard to really pin down. I attended. My mother had her 95th birthday a couple of months ago, and so of course the house was filled with, as we in the business called, eltacacas. And many of them were talking about that their sons or daughters were forcing them to buy smartwatches that they didn't understand. And there was also the complaint by a lot of them that they thought that Big Brother had come to visit them. So again, as with all technology being generational, it's very hard for the silver-haired set to really accept technology to replace their sons and daughters coming to take care of them. Luckily, my mother has my younger brother living very close nearby, and he's retired. So they spend a lot of time together. But I think a lot of older folks who are teetering between independent living and not independent living would rather rely on their live relatives or even live-in help to help them out rather than machines, only because of the age in which they were born and the society in which they were raised in. So the intent to buy thing, is that from those folks? Is that I'm forced to do it? Or is that sort of intent to buy by their sons and daughters who live across on the other side of the country and have no other choice if their parent wants to stay where they are?
Right, the caregivers are going to buy these things. That's so it is the relative and stuff. But it's part of. This is just the way things are going, right? This is unavoidable, ineluctable. It's just happening. I use a program myself because I'm on my own a lot of the time, traveling and stuff. I use a program that I check in, and if I don't check in, a friend or relative will see I haven't checked in and will start querying to see where I am if something's happened to me. It's just I have a bicycle helmet that does the same thing. The minute I start riding, it knows where I am, and if there's an accident, it's going to alert my emergency contact and send them a text and stuff. And I just think that's going to be part of everyday life. Young, old, doesn't matter anymore. And the pandemic has just kind of heightened that. It's like, I may not be able to come over and see a grandma because I may be in another state and be quarantined. Who knows? So,
but John, what's interesting is that there, Stuart talked about the general, the generational attribute of technology. There is this kind of stereotype that, again, just to use broad characterizations, unless you're 30 years old or younger, you don't use smart home technology or you're not a smartphone user. Our data, believe it or not, shows that 65 and above, 73% of that audience now have smartphones. Now, you got to chunk it out a little bit. You got to look at 65 to 70, 70 to 75, and those numbers actually taper down the older that you get. But that's a pretty stunning number, that over 70% have a smartphone if you're 65 or more. I agree that if someone's 85 years old, they're probably not a smartphone user. But, the baby boomers now are in that, plus 60 range, and, I guess I'm on the edge of I'm a baby boomer. I'm on the edge of it. I suspect that you two are as well. And you're pretty technology savvy. I think you've had a smartphone or two in your life, but
I get paid for being tech savvy. I in my poker game, I can't tell you I don't want to call them stupid questions, but the stupid questions I get from people who are younger than I am. And I'm well advanced in age, even if if my skin remains smooth. It's that Brazil thing I lift up all the time. But amongst my non-getting paid to know tech peers, I had a friend of mine who's concerned about security. He saw that John Oliver thing, and I think I might have mentioned this. He keeps his passwords in a spreadsheet, but his computer isn't password protected, and it's like, to tell somebody and he's a smart guy, but this is what we're dealing with. Just because they own these devices is not any indication that they understand or use the device.
But Stuart, the other thing I would tell you, going back to that password observation, I know a lot of smart people who will go nameless, who are very senior people at very senior technology companies, and that's the way they maintain their passwords, or in a Word document, which is not secure, which that's another podcast. You want to explode your head.
My head exploded.
So, John, let me give you the last word before we go on to our next topic.
Oh, well, I was thinking that, a lot of these older people now don't write them off. I mean, there's just there's an increasing catering to a new generation of influencers, and those influencers are over 75 years old. Those are the new TikTok users. Those are the new influencers. They're going, you know what? There's going to be this huge market of people. Maybe we should be appealing to them. And you've got some people doing gardening tips and all sorts of things that are taking off. So I think you'd be surprised at how many people over the age of 75 are using this stuff now.
No, and I also say, just to close on this, we've done some very interesting research in this connected healthcare, connected, smart homes play in the connected home area, and a very significant portion of the audience is willing to pay incremental dollars from a monthly service fee for remote monitoring, value add services. Now, again, a lot of that comes from caregivers, from families. Hey, I want to be connected with my family. I will. Data point of one. The reason why I got my mom an Apple Watch several years ago was the fall down detection and the cellular connectivity. That is technically a monitoring service. She falls down, and she has fallen down. I know instantly where she is, and I can get a hold of her. So I think this part of this is becoming a part of the fabric of getting older, and I think it's a welcome element. Certainly, there are privacy issues and all kinds of other issues we could talk about all day long. But it just shows that technology now is starting to satisfy the needs of the elderly as they to really have to maximize their quality of life as they get older. But let's
as long as it's complementary,
yes,
opposed to a replacement for human interaction.
I agree. Let's flip to the first topic, I should say. And I had to drop this one in. Backpedal, is that a fair word? Now, the interesting thing is, and Apple, of course, would never say they backpedal. They don't backpedal on anything. But I get the feeling, and you guys, I'm sure, have read a lot of the press over the last week. And it got some press, but it didn't get a lot. I don't know whether it was glee or whether the Apple capitulated on this. Apple hasn't shut it down completely, because I don't know whether Apple believes, was this a messaging problem, or do they think they've erred in terms of their implementation of the technology? Because those are two different things. So I know Stuart's chomping at the bit to say something about this. So I will turn this over to Stuart.
Well, I have 2 points. Point number one, those of us who have covered technology for years know that this is just a case, another giant case of, because they can do something, they didn't consider if they should do something. This has been rampant in technology for as long as any of us have been covering technology, that these companies think because they have the capability of doing it that they should do it. And this is just a giant hiccup. This should be abandoned absolutely. The second point is, it just occurred to me how this relates, and this might sound odd on the surface, how this relates to the law, the anti-abortion law that Texas just passed. Apparently, legal people are looking at fighting the law, especially the bounty hunting part of it, based on a Supreme Court ruling that says that private entities cannot be enabled to perform government oversight or government enforcement. And what Apple is doing here is clearly a case of a public company taking on the role of a governmental law enforcement agency. And in that way, I think that not only does this reek of Big Brotherhood, but they may be on very shaky legal ground, especially as the legal forces gather to attack the bounty aspect of the Texas abortion law. So those two things may be related, that Apple may have to drop this, not because this is just a bad thing, but because they can't be put in the position of enforcing the law.
Mm-hmm. John.
Yeah, I don't think it's defensible in terms of Apple being able to do this. I mean, starting to sift through and sort through and search through everyone's photographs is just, prima facie, just on the face of it, a bad idea. No matter what your intentions might be, it's just a bad idea. There's also enough to contend with of things that people do all the time online, in terms of transmitting this material and that sort of thing. But I don't see how they can defend this position going forward. Now, it may become what a lot of legal experts will tell you too. If people accept it, then it will become the norm, and then you won't have that expectation of privacy anymore. So it may be in 5 years from now, attitudes will change. like they have about video cameras being everywhere you go. That may change as well. But at the moment, it doesn't seem like a defensible thing. They said they're just delaying it, but I'd be surprised if they roll it out.
Yeah, my thought on this is that bad analogy, and you guys may laugh at this analogy. It's kind of like the pullout from Afghanistan. Everybody agrees that getting out of Afghanistan, for the most part, most of the population, Americans believe that it's probably a good idea for us. We've spent 20 years there. It's time for us to leave. But the way that it was done and the way it was executed, probably could have done a lot. We could have done a lot better job, regardless of your political persuasion. I think most Americans believe that that's not the best we could do. And I am obviously concerned about this. The whole approach that it has nothing to do with probable cause. I mean, everybody essentially, if you've got a photo on your phone, you're going to get scanned, for this information, even though they may not be looking at the image per se. It's got some type of serial number signature that they can match into a database. And Stuart, I like the point you made, and that the fact is it kind of sounds like, Apple internally want to do something desperately about this problem, which is noble. They want to combat it because smartphones are a device to capture and disseminate a lot of this very, very wrong, illegal, and awful content. But at the same time, the way they went about it is this the right way?
It assumed that because they could, that they had the right to do it. Mm-hmm. And it completely contradicts their whole message about privacy. If you're not going to let law enforcement get into your phone, like the San Bernardino killings, and Apple wouldn't give the FBI the key to the phone even if they had it, but Apple itself could get into your phone. That's just, from a messaging point of view, forget the purpose. That's a ridiculous message to send out there. We're going to keep your stuff private, except from us.
Well, I want to give John the last word, but I hope it's not a messaging thing. That happens a lot of companies. Hey, you know what? We were right in terms of trying to roll this out. We just did this a poor job of rolling this out from a messaging standpoint. I mean, I've worked for some big companies. That happens all the time. That people they think it's a messaging problem and not, hey, should we have done this in the first place? John, I'll give you the last word.
Right. For me, it's exactly what Stuart just said. Look, if you're claiming that you're protecting people's privacy when you're not, that's just doesn't seem right at all. And also, there's just the basic constitutional rights against unreasonable search and seizure. You can't go searching through everybody's bedroom. You can't go searching through everybody's drawers without any probable cause at all, which is exactly what they're proposing to do. So, yeah, I think it's a problem. So, noble cause, there are lots of things we'd like to prevent. Need to find a different way to do it. This isn't the way to go about it.
Well, as a dedicated Yankee fan, I would not want to search Stewart's office because there would be so much Mets memorabilia. It would make me sick to my stomach. So I don't want to have any exposure to
you should see what's really behind me.
Well, thank God for privacy laws. All right, let's flip to the next topic here. John, this was yours, but it's an interesting topic, and I'd like you to. I don't know whether it's gotten. I've read a couple of pieces on this, but I want you to do some background on this for those people who are not aware of this code bias suspicion that people that seems to be occurring with some of the TikTok filters.
Right. Well, it comes down to, there's a basic theory and problem with algorithmic bias. Basically, you create an algorithm and it's a program that's just going to look at typically a bunch of images and learn something, try to find something commonality, like pick out every chair you see in the photograph, which actually is something most computers still can't do very well. But it's great in facial recognition. For example, you train them on data sets of photographs, coming back to the privacy issue again, taking your photograph without your permission generally and using it in these data sets. Well, it depends. It's only as good as the data set you used, and it's only as good as the algorithm that you used. So, of course, that's where this coded bias comes in, because most of the faces will be male. Most of the faces will be Caucasian when they first did these data sets. And so they've tried to make adjustments over the past few years. But the TikTok filters are just another kind of tool that you use. and a lot of TikTok users. Now I have to credit my daughter pointed this out. This is something that teenage girls were using on their faces to adjust beauty, makeup. You can actually do the different colored eyes on one of the filters, things like that. And some of these people pointed out, gee, it only seems to work on certain faces, or it only seems to work on thinner faces. And some of these biases are creeping out. And then there was, of course, the Facebook pretty awful one this week, where some people of color were in a video or image, and they were tagged as being primates. That's why you don't use AI programs to do stuff like that, where you need a human being to look at these things. Anyway, so I just thought it was interesting with the people, like what's beautiful and what's not.
Yeah, well, the Facebook thing that obviously bothers me. But going back to the TikTok situation, where is let's assume for the sake of argument, it's just bad algorithms or immature algorithms that are not working properly. What's the damage? I mean, what's the practical from a TikTok standpoint?
Oh, well,
other than the fact that certain filters are not being applied to are being applied erroneously.
Well, the concern is that it reinforces stereotypes. So certain cultures, a very light skin, a certain shape of the eye is what's more attractive. And so the filter in that country will sort of beautify your image that way. Whereas, most Caucasian people want a little bit of a tan. They actually want more color in their skin and bigger eyelashes, things like that. So it reinforces these stereotypes that people have. Human nature is what it is, but it is a little disturbing when you see it work on some faces and not on other faces, if you get my drift.
Stuart, your thoughts?
Well, this and the Facebook ridiculousness are just signs of a much larger issue. This is not the fault of the filters or the algorithms. This is the fault of the coders. The coders tend to be white guys, and they come from middle or upper middle class homes. So the filters are only reflecting the people who are coding them to begin with. There was a whole film on this called Coded Bias.
Right.
Very clever title. The filmmaker is named, and I'm going to screw up the pronunciation of her name. It's Shalina Kanaya or Kantaya. I believe the film is available on Netflix, and it is an expansive look at how coded bias happens. And it's not the technology, it's who's got their hands and who's creating the technology. And the film has garnered enough, and this topic has gotten enough attention, especially this week, that I believe Congress has ordered a special viewing of the film, because this is one of the topics that they're looking over as they look over these tech giants and the powers that they are having. And coded bias is just becoming a more and more in-your-face issue, you'll excuse the pun, in terms of how people use computers, the growing use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. The machines only know what they're told, and who's telling them is what's causing all of these problems.
Right. And some students at NYU, for example, are looking at that I was talking to in graduate school at some of the issues too. It goes far beyond like facial recognition. It goes into judicial judgments. So, for example, you come up to the judge, and the judge takes a look at you and has never met you before, and looks at your case and says, should I give you the minimum or the maximum? And there's a program that's out there that they actually use to make some of those decisions and say, oh, look at him, his background. It's the data set they use, and say, he's likely to, offend again. And if I'm likely to offend again to that program, 5 years from me, I get the maximum. Now, these programs it's true, they're only as good as the information they get too. So they're working with very limited data sets, right? And that's the problem. Even if you program 1 billion photographs into there, they're never going to be as good right now as the technology stands as any one of us making that same identification. So, it's a very immature technology, but people are looking at it as a shortcut to handle some of these things. And that's where we get into these weird situations and bad situations, actually.
Right. Well, and just to wrap a bow around this topic as well, is that the implications for these filters, put TikTok aside or Facebook aside, and other usage models, e-commerce, for example, where an image could be used, the filter on the image could be used to prevent, hey, I think this audience would prefer this type of offer versus the other person. So there's an exclusionary type of impact or an inclusionary type of impact that could be bias-based. But it's certainly the example that you referenced, in that, in some type of crazy construct, if this technology was used for making a determination on the adjudication in some type of legal case, like a criminal case for that matter. I mean, this kind of technology is already being used, with jury selection. I mean, when they look at different people, how would they, based on biases, how would they vote in a particular, how would they interpret a particular case? So there's a lot to be said here, and I suspect we will not hear the last of it, and we'll be talking about this again. But very interesting topic to bring up. Should bring up the next topic. Yep, this is kind of like, I think, by the way, this is not just going to be Hulu and Disney.
Right.
John, I think ESPN, everyone is kind of raising their prices. Netflix just did it not too long ago. But I suspect, now that the streaming services are now becoming the primary way people are consuming their content, not just kind of a convenient thing, but it's really, it's replacing traditional forms of content consumption. I have a feeling this is the way of the future, and the whole cable cutting scenario where you could save a few bucks because you're moving away from your cable subscription. This is making the savings case a lot, not as compelling. So, let me go to John first, because John, you brought this topic up originally. So let me get your perspective.
So what struck me about this too is you're absolutely right. What you just summarized is absolutely correct. Everybody's starting to raise their prices again, but they don't. It's not like they have a chip shortage or something. There's no shipping container costs that are going up, right? They are just raising their prices because they think they can. And in the case of the Hulu, what bothered me the most about it was, people will say it's only $1, for the cheapest service, which will go from $5.99 to $6.99, and you have ads and all that stuff. And it's like, it's only $1 a month. Yeah, but it's 17% price hike. That's what it is. It's a 17% price hike. And so when they do these increases, they're actually a substantial increase. And then you add them all up, and you're right. The whole cord cutting thing looks like, well, maybe if I did this and I subscribed to this one, but not that one, and you try to do sort of a jigsaw puzzle of these things to make it cheaper. But yeah, I was just kind of appalled. And the only reason is they want to invest more money in original programming. It's not like it's costing them more per subscriber or anything like that. It's just they're looking at producing more, and Disney owns Hulu and ESPN. And, so that's why the prices are going up.
Right. Stuart?
Well, this reminds me of the great business sage Groucho Marx in Animal Crackers in 1931. And I'll paraphrase here. He said that we'll open a restaurant and we'll give them a 75-cent meal that'll knock their eyes out. Once we knock their eyes out, we can charge them anything we want. And so this is what's essentially going on with that's the business model that almost every business has followed since the birth of capitalism. And so the case of these guys rising their prices by whatever amount, John is right. This has now become a real competition. I remember that Netflix started out as a DVD movie delivery service, essentially. And now all of these services are turning into ABC, NBC, and CBS, churning out all of this very expensive original content. And this is all about attracting new subscribers. And the only way that you're going to attract new subscribers is to wave better 75-cent meals at them in order to attract them. And of course, if you're going to produce, multi-million-dollar productions, and you watch some of these shows that they're really well produced and very expensive to produce, well, somebody's going to pay for that.
Right. No, I violently agree with that. And I think what people lose focus on is that each one of these streaming services have now turned into Hollywood class studios. Now, when you go back 25 years, you think of the Universals, the Paramounts, the United Artists that, would throw, $10 or $15 million at producing a movie, then they'd spend another $50 or $100 million, marketing it and getting it out the door. And now you've had this proliferation. Apple is obviously in this space. Netflix, obviously. And by the way, the content they're doing, to Stuart's point, is very high caliber, well-produced content. Netflix has won a number of Oscars and has been nominated many, many times. And my point is that element of the equation is, I think, a complete, redo of the business model in the entertainment space. Now, having said that, we also have to remember that this is a business. And there are companies out there that, because unless you want to make them a regulated agency like the water company or the electric company, if they can raise prices, they will raise prices.
Well, this is the same thing. Remember, this is the same thing that happened in the box office race. When television came in, suddenly movie theaters had to compete for eyes. Right. And so as a result, the movies got bigger and gaudier and more expensive. Movie theater, the rental fees went up. The movie theaters raised their prices. I mean, all of us are young enough or old enough to remember you could go to the movies for $5. And now what is like $20 to get a decent ticket, because the movies that are in the movie theaters have to be big enough to get you to want to go to the movies to begin with. So the new James Bond movie, I haven't gone to a movie theater since the pandemic started, but I'm going to go see the new James Bond movie in the movie theater. That's worth seeing on the big screen. And there's a couple of other films that I'm thinking that I might actually want to go to a movie theater to watch. So the same thing is happening on these streaming services. They're producing gaudier content. It's costing them more money to produce, and they're doing it to be in competition with the other ones who are producing gaudier content. Eventually, all of this will come to a business model change, only because it will have to. There'll be some mergers involved, just there was like in the movie business when studios merge together. So I think that you start to see some of the broadcast people start to partner with some of the streaming people to help produce this content and get secondary. It'll premiere on Netflix, but eventually NBC will show it, that sort of thing. You're going to start to see some of these only because they're going to have to do something with the business model.
All right. So again, guys, listen, thanks for your time. Appreciate it, John, Stuart. And by the way, next week is the Big Apple announcement, and we will certainly be doing we haven't scheduled it yet, but we will probably end up doing a special edition of the Smart Tech Check podcast with John, Rob, and Stuart to recap the big announcements that are going to be talked about next Tuesday. But thanks for joining me, guys, for today's podcast. For our viewing and listening audience, please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Please visit Park Associates at www.parkassociates.com. And until next time, have a great week.